Hey everybody, this is Blake here and welcome to my review of Jurassic Park in IMAX 3D. I wanted to see this for a few reasons. The first is, I've never been to the IMAX before. Well, let me rephrase. I have, but I've never seen a movie in it. The closest I got to was some documentary where all I remember is that it took place on a mountain, so I presume it was some expedition up Everest. But the only thing that really stood out for me was they play Here Comes the Sun at the very end, and I like that song. But otherwise, nothing jumped at me. So I wanted to finally check out something in IMAX, but you know, it costs a shitload of money, so I wanted to see something that I know I'd like, and I happen to be a huge fan of Jurassic Park. I actually saw that when it first came out in theaters back in 1993. I must have been 7 years old, and I remember that day vividly, even though my memory is so poor. Pretty much my half-siblings were visiting from Utah, and they had seen it, and they thought it was awesome, and I think they were reading the book. So I begged my dad to go to take me to see it. But, you know, I was 7 years old, so he was reluctant to do so, but he eventually caved in. And, of course, why wouldn't I adore Jurassic Park? It's about dinosaurs, and it's a horror movie, and at that time, I was a huge horror movie fan. Jaws was my favorite film. So I saw it and immediately fell in love with it. It terrified me, it filled me with a sense of wonderment, and I became a huge fanboy. I started collecting all the toys. I have also a lot of memories of me and my friends staging these epic Jurassic Park battles, and you know, it just stayed with me for the longest of times. And I'd say, yeah, Jurassic Park is one of my favorite movies. Do I like it as much as Jaws? No, but Jaws is my favorite movie of all time, so what do you expect? So I guess I'll go ahead and review Jurassic Park, even though I've already spoiled what I felt about it. I then talk about the IMAX and 3D experience. What I think really impressed me the most about Jurassic Park is how it genre bends so masterfully. It could be adventurous and awe-inspiring one moment, then intense and terrifying the next. It could be sweet and funny, but also pretty brutal and dark. It does all this without ever betraying its tone. It felt very organic to the story, and the end result is I felt everything it wanted me to feel, even to this day. So whenever it wants to be scary, you know, I cringe, I shiver. But whenever it wants to be funny, I laugh. And whenever it's being, you know, sweet and dramatic, I'm like, oh. Yeah, that's the main reason why I love it. But if I broke that down, I definitely credit the music, John Williams' score, for really being the most impressive aspect of that film. Even more so than the special effects, because really his music is what drives every scene. Whenever it wants to be awe-inspiring, it's because of the music. And, you know, John Williams and Steven Spielberg have a lot of chemistry as filmmakers, so, you know, his music really complements, you know, the cinematography, how scenes are staged and framed, and vice versa. The special effects, though, amazing. For those who think that old school practical effects are obsolete, you need to watch Jurassic Park. And for those who think CGI sucks, you need to also watch Jurassic Park. Even though there are a few moments that definitely have aged a little bit, I think it's the perfect marriage of old meeting new. The practical effects are used whenever they can be used, but then CGI is used to fill in those gaps. And you know, at no point was I ever taken out of the movie because, you know, it was made 20 years ago, so of course the CGI isn't going to be as polished as it is now. But it's still really good. I've seen big budgeted movies that came out within the last year that I don't think hold a candle to Jurassic Park when it comes to special effects. And the designs of the dinosaurs, you know, they're really unique but also familiar. When the T-Rex shows up, I'd never seen a T-Rex that looked like that. Generally, the original design was something you'd see in like the original Lost World or King Kong or something like that. So, and then not only that, the sounds are so great and memorable. Whenever the dinosaurs roar, you know, it's freaky, and it's different too. A lot of the critics have complained that the characters are kind of stereotypical. I disagree, only in that even if the characters are a little, I don't know, familiar. The actors portraying them, they do so very differently. For example, Bob Peck is Robert Muldoon. Robert Muldoon might be the typical hunter, but Bob Peck, I don't know, he doesn't really resemble what I think of when I think of the Great White Hunter. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Or, you know, Sam Neill as Alan Grant. He's not your typical hero. So I liked that. I thought the actors portrayed the characters very well, and whether they're stereotypical or not, I thought the characters were all a lot of fun. I remember the majority of their names. You know, Arnold, Hammond, Muldoon, Grant, Ellie Sadler, Ian Malcolm, Donald Gennaro. That says a lot, once again, with my poor memory, but I can remember all these characters vividly. So yeah, no complaints there. Jesus, that's pretty... One thing, too, I like that I always appreciated as a kid was just how the various sets and props were just cool looking. I love how the designs of the cars, it just looks awesome. I'd love to drive one of those, and as a kid I made sure to collect all those different vehicles and you know, the merchandise stuff they even use in the film at times. I really liked that, and it's just an all-around movie that stayed with me. But one thing I really respect too is how, you know, the stakes, how high they're risen by the finale. Throughout the rest of the film, you know, you feel like you're just watching a force of nature, you know, occur. You know, the Tyrannosaurus Rex isn't evil, it's just feeding. But the Velociraptors, there's something more sinister and evil about them to where, you know, makes them pretty scary. As a kid, I was at first a little disappointed because I thought the T-Rex was so much cooler than the Raptors. But at the same time, you know, the Raptors were smarter and more deadly. So, you know, I immediately began to fear them. That's really all I have to say. This movie, it's not perfect. There are definitely some flaws. I was always bugged whenever they have that scene where Grant and Ellie Sadler, they're trying to keep the door closed and the Raptor's trying to break it and they're reaching for the gun but they can't get it. And I kept thinking, why doesn't the stupid little kid go grab the gun and kick it towards them? Or they tell the kid to go get it. Of course, more than likely the answer is Spielberg probably was uncomfortable with letting kids handle a gun in any way, but that always kind of bothered me. There are definitely some major continuity errors. At one point, and I was sure they were going to edit this out, when the Raptor first enters the kitchen, you could see a crewman's hand clearly on its, grabbing its tail, probably straightening it out. I thought it was obvious when I watched on VHS on my small screen television. So it's really, really obvious on the IMAX. But at the same time, I'm glad they didn't really tamper with it too much. I was worried that they were going to be like, you know, Star Wars Episode 1, where apparently they added certain effects, and they didn't. It's still the same classic movie, just all-around great action-adventure horror film. Another thing, too, I think that goes kind of underappreciated is how they use exposition. That must have been really difficult because Jurassic Park, the book, is so heavy with information. And here I thought they presented most of their points in a way that went down easily. It didn't feel too dense. I like, for example, the tour where they're explaining how the cloning works and how it's, you know, designed for kids, but I thought that was a pretty clever way to do things. And, you know, when he's talking about the raptors' hunting patterns and stuff like that, I liked how they did that. So I guess I'll stop there. How does the IMAX and 3D work? Well, the 3D was a little disappointing. For the most part, I didn't even notice it. Maybe that's for the better. Honestly, the very first thing I noticed was they have the IMAX credit scenes, and the credit scene in the very beginning. Well, actually, it's just the IMAX logo. But that is like the best 3D I've ever seen in anything. So the rest of the movie just feels so flat when it came to that. Just, you know, afterwards. But it never got in the way either. I was a little worried that because when you convert, even when you do it good, if you weren't planning on making it 3D, I do feel that sometimes that could ruin the image, because generally they'll focus on whatever was supposed to come out at the screen. So if they did that with like the T-Rex, a snout or something, I think that could have totally distorted everything in that scene. So I'm glad they didn't do that. But otherwise, you know, I don't think it's necessary that you see it in 3D. IMAX was amazing though. I loved how, I was a little worried that would make the picture look stretched. It didn't. I thought it looked great. It brought a lot of detail to the dinosaurs, made them seem much more realistic even during the parts where they use, you know, it's obviously CGI or that said crewman's hand. You know, it really added a lot, and I loved the fact that I saw it in IMAX. So it's up to you whether you want to check it out in IMAX, if it's worth the money. I think it costs around 20 bucks a piece. No, that's not right. I think it's closer to 15. But, you know, I have no regrets there. I thought IMAX really did serve the action, but 3D, I don't know. Like I said, I didn't even notice. In fact, the only thing I found to be really annoying is I did not like the glasses. They're different from the kinds you get in normal theaters, but they're a lot heavier and they kept making my ears sore. So yeah, that was a bit problematic. I guess just to complete this video, if you'd like to read my written review, go ahead. It's one of my older reviews, which is another way of saying it sucks. But it is also one of my most read reviews, so you might want to check that out of interest, whatever. But after that, you know, Michael Crichton went back and wrote The Lost World, Jurassic Park, and I remember reading that too when it came out. And even though I think Jurassic Park, you know, it's weird because as a kid I preferred The Lost World because it was much more cinematic. It's not quite as exposition heavy. It's not as sciencey. But as an adult I've sort of changed my mind since I've read both books within like the last year or so. Even though The Lost World is a good sequel, I think Jurassic Park the novel was better. But it's weird because even though Michael Crichton wrote it to be, you know, more cinematic, the movie ended up changing everything. I mean, Jurassic Park did make a lot of changes, the first one, but I understand why. It was Spielberg, you know, giving his own touch, such as though, for example, how Alan Grant doesn't like kids. Oddball parenting is always a theme of Spielberg's. But then other things like, for example, the rafting sequence, I could understand why they took it out. Even though it is one of the best scenes of the novel, that would have been a bitch to make, especially at that time. But The Lost World just, I mean, it practically changed everything. But at the same time, I actually do like it a lot. I don't think it's as good as Jurassic Park, and it's dumb. There are a lot of scenes that you're like, oh my god, like the stupid-ass gymnastics against the Velociraptor. What the fuck was that? So it's flawed. I do think the screenplay is a bit dumbed down compared to the crisply written Jurassic Park, which I also think just had a better story than The Lost World, but whatever. But Spielberg, I think, is just a master director. You know, he makes every scene so intense and exciting, and, you know, pretty much once again, if he wants the scene to be, you know, awe-inspiring, it will be awe-inspiring. I did have one major problem with The Lost World, though, and that I didn't like how he kind of became preachy with how we should be treating the dinosaurs. We're supposed to root for Vince Vaughn as he frees all the dinosaurs, but really, he caused every fucking death in that movie. So, fuck him and fuck that message. But otherwise, I do think The Lost World was a pretty engaging sequel. Jurassic Park 3, though, I've never been a huge fan of. I thought it was really mediocre. To me, that was, you know, it's just as dumb as The Lost World, but I think Spielberg is such a better director than Joe Johnston. So Spielberg, you know, made these scenes so much more exciting and intense, whereas Joe Johnston, I don't know, everything about that film seems so small scale and uninspired in comparison. So yeah. But they're apparently going to make a Jurassic Park 4, which I'm really looking forward to. You know, while they're at it, they should make a Carnosaur 4. I love the Carnosaur movies also. If you want a gory-ass dinosaur movie, even though it is definitely a trilogy of B movies, check out the Carnosaur films. Unfortunately, if they did a Carnosaur 4, they'd use pure CGI, and I think it's much easier to do decent practical effects than with a low budget than doing decent CGI with a low budget. So I'm sure a Carnosaur 4 would suck, but I would love to see one. So that is that. Definitely check out Jurassic Park if you haven't seen it, whether you want to see it in the big screen or small screen. It's just up to you. If you have seen it, well, once again, do you want to watch it on the big screen like I would? It's up to you. So hopefully I'll have a review of Evil Dead, the remake, upcoming soon. I'm going to try to watch it tomorrow. We'll just have to see. But that is that. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and check out my website. I did written reviews of all the Kickboxer movies and Maximum Overdrive, Stephen King camp classic, if you want to call it that. So that is all. I'll see you guys later.